Welcome to the Revenue Rewired podcast, hosted by StringCan Interactive's visionary CEO, Jay Feitlinger, and no-nonsense COO, Sarah Shepard. We're here to accelerate your revenue and give your marketing purpose. All right, hello and welcome everybody to this next episode of the Revenue Rewired podcast. Hi, Jay.
Hey, Sarah. I'm
Welcome
home.
back. I know you had to deal with flying multiple flights during this
Yes.
whole TSA government shutdown stuff. How was that?
It was fine till I got to the United States. So all the Spain and Paris flights were all great until I got to Dallas, and it just was never-ending chaos. But overall, it could have been a lot worse. So I was happy that we got home only a few hours late.
Did you, by the way, beep through a bunch of the screenings because of all the metal in your body now with your collarbone?
I did not, so I'm all good. I was definitely worried about that.
I thought about that. I was like, I wonder if he has to get beeped and hand wanded from now on.
You're so funny.
Well, today, guys, we want to talk about something that's kind of funny, I think a little bit interesting. This industry is just constantly in flux, which is part of the reason why I love marketing. I never liked a job that I could figure it out and just kind of mind-numbingly do it. And in marketing, you can never figure anything out. And I think that's part of the acceptance of the chaos that is marketing.
Hmm.
And Jay, you've been in it a lot longer, but today we want to talk about why businesses are so obsessed with Reddit. And what's funny is in 6 months it might be something different, but you know, we attend a agency conference, and at that conference, the topic of Reddit came up a lot. And it was surprising to me. You would think like I don't know, X, LinkedIn, HubSpot, TikTok. I mean, heck, we had Snapchat come up a couple years ago with clients, but it didn't have the staying power of the conversations I'm hearing about Reddit. And so we kind of dug into it a while ago, and I've been on it as a business with our username. And I can understand why there's a pivot for businesses to move to Reddit. And Jay, you and I were chatting about why this space has become so appealing to marketers. And we want to tie that into an interesting chat we had about like your recent travels.
Hmm.
So why don't you share like how would Reddit compare to what your experience was in going overseas?
Well, I think first of all, obviously those that haven't been active on Reddit, it's been what around for 20 years. So I want to
Yeah,
make
it's
sure
not
for
new.
those,
It's not new.
which is what I think is really interesting, is that it's one of those platforms that for many, many years I had not heard being talked about, unless you're like in like the very niche space or the stocks or crypto or something like that. But the last year or two, you're right. I'm hearing about it a ton more now in the business world. But back to your question, it's interesting, as we start talking about Reddit and correlating it to this, podcast topic. When I was, in Spain the last few weeks traveling, as you know, Sarah, and those that don't know me will find this I hopefully interesting, but I never check bags. And so I was traveling with my wife for over 3 weeks, and neither of us checked bags, which again, a lot of my friends are amazed by that alone because sometimes, when they travel with their wives, they have a lot of shoes and whatnot. And Rachel has been the most amazing traveler when it comes to that. But of course, the downside of that is the products that you use, everything from like deodorant to, your skincare stuff, you're going to run out. Not only because you have limitations on, the number of ounces you could have, but obviously you have to be really selective in your bags, being able to travel that long and trying to figure out how to make everything work out. And so typically every week or so while we were traveling throughout Spain, I constantly had to run into various different, pharmacies and whatnot to pick up various items. And the one thing I hate about traveling sometimes, I don't like feeling like a silly American tourist. And obviously, one of the the signals that probably tells everyone there that I'm a tourist is I have my phone constantly out, not because I'm texting and whatnot. It's because I'm using it for translation services. And so I walk into a store, and of course, not a single brand in there is related to one that I know, and then of course everything is in a different language. So I'm there, translating all these things, making sure I'm not picking up like, Nair instead of deodorant. And it's like my biggest fear. But I think for me, I love traveling, as you know, Sarah. But the part that I find hard for me is like that decision fatigue. And I find myself often at end of the day, kind of tired, more than I would think I would be. And mainly it's because I'm constantly all day long having to try to understand different culture and language and all these things that I just don't know that I take for granted as, if I was a local. And so I think back to your question, where I think this relates so well to this Reddit conversation is, I think that a big reason why it's become so popular is I think people out there are really struggling with how to cut through all the noise. And I think consumers are being bombarded with messaging and promotions and advertising in every place they look. And it becomes really hard for, I think, for brands to break through that to connect with current and or prospective customers. And that's why I think platforms like Reddit, as like a new shiny sexy object, it does, I think, from what you found on the marketing side, it does allow brands that do a good job at understanding how to leverage that platform to all of a sudden find a new place to fish, where a lot of their competitors probably are not active in.
Yeah, because you and I talked about this probably, I don't know, a while ago, and I've heard this from all of my peers. We've heard it a ton just from our clients and prospects is LinkedIn used to be the singular business tool.
Hmm.
It was a business social platform, and that's what it was for. And you and I have found that the conversations that get the most engagement and reward through the algorithm are not business related. It's like someone asking for a tire shop in Utah. Like that drives me nuts because I liked the purity of that platform. But what's happened is the saturation has exhausted people where they now no longer trust the tool because the minute you connect with someone, it's some cold outreach message right away. I can always tell it's automated if I connect with them and then I just get a message right away. And it's funny being in marketing, but also being a little adverse to the tactics. It's because we're in it all day, every day. And if we're feeling that way, then I think a lot of other people are too, because they're just so fatigued with the overwhelming inundation of messages and content. And it's just easier to do nothing than something. And where Reddit has really kind of creeped into this business space a little more is that it's fresh. It's not tainted by just hundreds of conversations that are all over the place. It feels unpolished, which makes it feel real. And I think people are really looking for something that's real and authentic. And Reddit is sort of offering that. In addition, Reddit is also very structured. You can pick and choose like the channels that you want to look at or converse in and be a part of. And that's, I think, part of the niche focus of Reddit is that you can get to where you want to go faster. And we've seen a lot of our clients and even ourselves struggle with, why this is so successful is because they can be really focused. And, you and I have talked about fishing where the new fish are at. And
Hmm.
this is like, AI is pulling it all for you. I think Reddit really came into the forefront of conversations when ChatGPT was announcing how much information they were pulling from Reddit. And it got people curious, like, well, what is it about this tool? And it's because it's real people conversations training a robot.
Yeah, and I think to your point, again, and obviously I've always been very into all the various different technical, aspects of marketing, all the various platforms, and I was pretty active in Reddit many, many years ago. But when I brought it up to various different, other, marketing agencies, often, the answers I got back was it's just too overwhelming to them. And it's interesting, and I'm hoping maybe you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about that webinar you recently attended. But I think one of the reasons why, for us, a lot of times these kind of platforms that, yes, can feel like you're jumping into the ocean. For us, it has felt like we're picking, which exact boat we want to be on because we know who we want to focus on. And that's what I love about Reddit is like when we go on there, we can pick exactly the channels that we know our ideal customers would be engaging in. Or if we're using it more from a research perspective, we know what question we're trying to answer. But I couldn't imagine going onto Reddit and if you were like, we are a full service marketing agency that works with everyone out there, no matter what your budget, geography, whatever is. It's like if you went on there and searched like the marketing channel or whatever you wanted to search, like very broad, I think I'd be overwhelmed. Because, again, like I've gone on to some of those out of curiosity, and someone might ask a simple question like, what do you guys recommend in marketing to get leads in a very general marketing channel? And of course, there's going to be 20,000 agencies responding and saying, oh, we can sell that to you. And it just becomes this, very uninviting experience. I feel overly promotional. But what I do love about it, I'd love to have maybe you talk a little bit about the webinar, is I always correlate Reddit to almost like an access like a LinkedIn group without having to join it. Because you can just go on to the channel and check out all the details that are public and decide if the questions and answers are ones that you would find of value. And then you could join it and you can obviously leave it whenever you want, but it just feels a lot more less friction to kind of get into the channels that you're interested in.
Yeah, the friction piece is really key because, we're talking about individual channels, which I think is a differentiator. And it's funny because you didn't realize that was a differentiator until you were inundated and overwhelmed. And
Hmm.
then I can't, it's too much. And that webinar I attended was how you're losing customers through your homepage. And what was really brave, I've kind of had this attitude in the last couple of weeks of like, what am I so afraid of? I talk a lot to some other agency owners about my risk conscious nature. I wouldn't say I'm totally risk adverse, but risk conscious. And you and I have had this chat in our Colby assessments. I'm like a 9 on the fact finder, and you're like a 9 on the risk tolerance category. And so that's like, this is an identified mismatch between the two of you that could cause potential problems. And we're like, yeah, no kidding. But, this webinar, he asked, does anyone want to be brave enough and put their homepage out there? And I'm going to do a quick quiz and I'm going to ask the audience, can you tell me who they are, what they do, and who they do it for? And of course, I threw string can up there immediately because we're always looking to do better and learn, not just for ourselves, but for our clients. And what's interesting is we still had opportunity, where I thought it was clear. When I looked at other people's pages, they also thought they were super clear. But when you're asking a complete stranger, it was really validating that, okay, this is obviously not as clear as you thought it was because no one else in this room could say what it is that you did. And that was just one example. And so when we threw ours up there, it actually, was one of the more complimentary responses. But he still said there's an opportunity for you to refine who you're talking to because you almost tackle a pain point in the hero when I would put it further down. And I
Hmm.
thought that was really interesting where, his stat was 100% of B2B prospects will look at your website. And, I know there's been a lot of conversations about websites, whether they're dying or, should I invest in them and how AI is using your website basically to present zero click responses. It's still an incredibly valuable tool. But, I think people have an opportunity to refine who it is that they're speaking to and do it in a way that's very clear. And you almost have to simplify what it is you do when the tendency has been to overcomplicate to make yourself stand out. And I think we're seeing this shift to the opposite. Dealing with people with decision fatigue is a really hard space to be in. And in order to get through that space, you have to be the clearest, simplest response solution phrase in order for them not to have to think further about what it is that you offer them to solve their problems.
I love that. I think, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but I do want to make sure that we are very clear on this episode because the biggest aha that I've gotten through this, obviously, about, hey, if you haven't tried Reddit, definitely, jump on there. But I think the biggest aha that I'm getting out of this really is about that focus. And I think, that's one of the areas that I'm really proud about, and how we've helped so many companies over the last, my gosh, 15 years now, is that, typically we meet with the company, and obviously the larger the company is and the more offerings they have, the harder this conversation gets because when you talk about like your client profile, they obviously could say, there's so many. And then we go down the path of which is the ideal one. And then it's like if you could pick the one that's going to really make the significant difference to your bottom line, what is it and why? And I think, for us, obviously me especially, I'm very, opportunistic. It's hard for me to walk away from opportunities. I know this caused a lot of interesting debates between me and you. But I think from a marketing perspective, I think, again, no matter how large your budget is and how large your team is, you just can't go after everyone. And so I think if you think about your marketing from the lens of like, if you had 15 minutes and your job was to go onto Reddit and find the exact right channel and the exact right content that you're going to find of most interest to help you do whatever it is you're trying to do, either finding new opportunities or doing research, I think that question would be a lot easier to answer if you had that strategy already in place. And so I just think that that would be really important to think about is when you take a step back and you really analyze, the years you've been in business and you look at all of your, clients, pick your favorite one and hopefully your favorite one also was your most profitable one. And then, think about it from an ideal client profile perspective and figure out what about that made the most value and make that a strategy of, okay, for the next 90 days, all we're going to focus on is getting more of those. And, fish where the fish are at or fish where the new fish are at, as you said before. I think that's a really, really exciting place to be. And again, I know that a lot of marketers would be like, well, if we did that, we're going to miss out on X and Y and Z. And it's like, yes, but that's where I think our whole point is like, you got to be brave. That silly phrase, the riches are in the niches. I think that's where it gets kind of exciting is if we said to you had a magic wand and you could wave that wand and had 20, 30, 50, 100 more of the clients that you love, that's generally the most profit for your business. If all you had more of that, most companies would say I would love that. So why not have your marketing support that is really what I think we're trying to say here. Would you agree?
I would, and I had a conversation with a prospect last week that was struggling with this exact same thing, where he goes, I know that we're spending time on people that are not the right people for my business to serve.
Hmm.
And, he goes, there's two different basically ICPs. And I said, well, what's the revenue breakout? Oh, it's about 50-50. And then what's the ideal one? And how does that compare to the other? And he goes, well, from a profit margin perspective, it's about 70-30. So yes, it totally validates what you were saying about they enjoyed working with them and they were the more profitable ones. But it clearly wasn't being communicated as succinctly to the sales team because they were still bringing on wrong fit customers. And that I think creates a lot of unnecessary stress and inefficiencies in an organization. And they often don't realize it until it's a disaster in the customer experience side. It's a lot like making a bad hire. It's just the less clear you are in the job description and what your expectations are, it's just not great for the candidate or for yourself. And so being niche in just about any aspect of a business is a really clear-cut way to make sure that you're doing the stuff that makes you the happiest and the most profitable and the most successful. You wouldn't put out a vague job description and, interview all these people. If you have a niche job description, like this is exactly what I'm looking for, which we did that last year. I
Hmm.
basically made a unicorn job description of the things that we needed. And it was a while before we found the perfect person. And I think that's also another piece of this is the patience. We're just moving so fast and everything needs to be Speedy Gonzalez and AI has just only exacerbated that being niche, and maybe you agree or disagree, does require a little bit of patience until it just kind of spreads like wildfire. And once you're known, it's okay to be known. You don't need to be known for everything because it's really hard to explain that to other people who don't know your business.
Yeah, and I think to your point, a lot of this can be very overwhelming. I have found myself numerous times over the last year, being like, oh, I have 15 minutes to do X. And then it's like you almost feel like analysis paralysis, and then you get stuck. And so again, here, what I'm loving about this conversation is when you do have clarity around your true north, everything from your company's brand, the messaging, your positioning, the value you bring, your offering, and most importantly, your ideal client profile, your ICP. Again, I know we're spending a lot of time talking about it from a Reddit point of view, but as you were talking, Sarah, I started thinking about it. Like you can have that same Reddit lens with pretty much every platform out there. Again, like look at LinkedIn. I mean, the millions of contacts on LinkedIn. I know we're beating up on it a little bit earlier on this show, but LinkedIn still has millions and millions of people out there that potentially could be a great customer of yours. If you just go on to LinkedIn search and type in, you know, I don't know, marketing VP, it's just going to give you back a complete mess. But if you could think about it from the lens of how can you leverage the algorithm to connect with the right kind of people that you really can serve, all of a sudden now you might find LinkedIn not to be so overwhelming. I think if you apply that kind of mindset to everything that you do, between the content you're putting out there, the events you're attending, the platforms you're engaging in, I just feel like it might feel a little less like you're drowning in the ocean.
Yeah, and I know we are beating up on LinkedIn a little bit. It's still an exceptional tool. I mean, I really like it, and it's always a really helpful tool, but it's also driven by metrics and,
Hmm.
engagement and things there where Reddit still has that engagement, but it's more of a FYI to the reader than it is a reward. And, of course, you can still advertise on Reddit just like you can LinkedIn. Like they're not just doing this out of the goodness of their hearts, but they've helped people refine what it is that they're looking for. And so that whole decision fatigue really is just something that you may or may not even, as you're listening to this, may or may not even realize that this is happening to you personally and professionally. You just get so much communication every day between email, phone call, text. It feels like a lot. And then Reddit's almost refreshing where I just want to be singularly topic focused. And your prospects are looking for that too. They just want a solution to their problem. And if they find your business, if it's super clear, then it's a no-brainer for them to reach out and communicate with you.
I love that. I think Sarah, as we maybe wrap up this one, I think it'd be kind of fun if you don't mind putting you on the spot here for a second. If you put yourself in the shoes of like our ideal client, the CMO or VP of marketing, who, has never thought about Reddit as being an opportunity to even consider, investing energy into. So for maybe more of the newbie, who has obviously extensive marketing and leadership background, but doesn't have extensive experience in actually using Reddit, what would you recommend be like the next couple of steps that they would do to get a little more familiar and comfortable with it?
I mean, I'll share how I got into it because I'm very platform conscious. So I shared maybe I've shared in an episode, I don't know, about how when you hired me, I didn't have a Facebook page and you were like,
Yep.
"How did we hire you? You don't even have a Facebook account?" Like I don't have a single social media app downloaded on my phone except Reddit. And so I thought, okay, I really don't want to get sucked into something. I want to be intentional. And it was really, to be perfectly honest, just to spy. I just wanted to observe what was going on in a handful of channels. I picked entrepreneur, B2B business, and cold email. And I just
Hmm.
observed those channels. I'd log in once a day and I just would read through a couple of interesting conversations and see how others were responding. Now, businesses are getting kind of savvy and they're popping in and saying, hey, our company solves that problem. And some people are actively asking for those solutions. And I was really looking for how do our ICPs communicate their pain on a platform where, like Reddit, where they don't realize they're maybe being watched by a tool like a LinkedIn or something. And that was really the point, was just to observe. I didn't intend to engage. I wasn't there to promote us or do anything like that. I just wanted to see how people were talking. And it was really eye-opening. I think I shared a couple of initial screenshots with you in the first couple weeks that were validating, surprising, intriguing. So it was more of the real world experience. It's kind of like the outside looking in, and how those pain points were being communicated, challenges with tools that were unique kind of edge cases, and how those were solved. So it was more of a research. I guess that's my fact finder coming out.
Hmm.
So that probably isn't the right solution for everybody, but just logging in, picking a couple channels that would be maybe shoulder cases to the pain that you solve, maybe the result of the pain or, the initial experience that someone would have with whatever it is your business offers, and just observing how those conversations are playing out is really eye-opening.
I love it. I mean, what's funny is again, I was pretty active on Reddit many years ago, and I had not been on it probably since COVID. And because of your work, you got me kind of re-engaged into it. And I see it now from a different perspective, and it's been really helpful. So I think that advice you just gave, I think was super smart because my advice would have been now go make a post. And I think from what you showed me, it's like if you don't know what to expect, you might get so much, sales pitches, and that obviously might turn people off. So I really liked that approach that you just gave because I think it'd be kind of a nice way to dip your toe in the water and see if you feel like this platform could be worth investing energy in over a longer period of time, before you jump fully in.
It is an interesting way if you do have a very niche audience of finding out some of the spaces your audience might be hanging out in and seeing what's resonating with them and what problems are they trying to solve. I think it really was a unique perspective in the community that Reddit has created, where LinkedIn is a little bit more like business peer to peer. And it felt like Redditors were just more regular people, and it's no
Hmm.
different, but the conversations they were having were just so different, so real and very nuanced. And they were not promoting or posting something. It was, hey, has anyone had experience with this cold email tool that has worked great for me in the past, but it's not anymore? And what's your process? And so it's a very collaborative experience, which is, I think a lot of people are looking for.
Love it. All right, let's wrap this up.
Awesome. Well, glad to have you back, Jay. It's
I'm
we
excited to be
missed
home.
you.
I
Sad you
appreciate
didn't bring
that.
any wine, but it's fine. Rachel,
No,
make a note for next time.
I have cases being delivered, so
Okay, okay,
we'll
okay.
have
You're
plenty.
forgiven. You're
Thank you.
forgiven. All right. We hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to the Revenue Rewired podcast. Send us your questions to podcast@stringcaninteractive.com and follow us for more insights to drive your business forward.